Chapter 10. The Six Paramitas. How can we get along better with others? What can we do to stop being so self-absorbed? And how do we instead develop the mind of compassion and joy? We can follow the examples of bodhisattvas, beings who are awakened, who no longer feel jealousy or sadness, and who are dedicated to alleviating the suffering of all beings by showing them the way to liberation. These beings practice the six paramitas, or perfections, of giving, moral discipline, patience, diligence, meditative concentration, and wisdom. The first of the paramitas is giving. Giving counters greed and ensures that in the future we will have ample resources to continue helping others. The underlying meaning of giving is letting go. There are three basic kinds of giving. First, we can give material resources, such as food, money, clothing, and so on. Just as important is to give of ourselves, our time, energy, or skills. Second, we can teach others what we know, should they wish to learn. Third, we can inspire fearlessness in others, which occurs when we relieve them of their worries and apprehensions. The giving of wealth can be of material resources or of our time and energy. What we have that others do not, we can freely give to them. When we see others with an urgent need, we can take the initiative and provide them with what they need, be it a material object or assistance in what they are doing. If we see someone who is without food, we can initially provide them with food and then try to find ways to help them become self-sufficient. As our giving becomes increasingly unconditional, we will begin to feel more spiritually liberated. The more we give away, the fewer possessions we have to worry about. Soon, we will realize that we need very little to be truly content. For example, those with abundant wealth worry a great deal about protecting their possessions from theft and loss. After giving, we will find our worries reduced and our minds calmer. Lacking material objects to give, we can give of our abilities and energy. When we see others who need assistance, we can pitch in and help them. We do not need possessions or wealth to practice this kind of giving. We can just selflessly help others through our actions. But for some people, giving of themselves is more difficult than giving material objects. To be able to give of our time requires us to stop thinking of ourselves and to instead focus on someone else. For example, instead of watching a game on television, we might go outside and play a game with our children, or help an elderly neighbor with some yard work. In addition, when we commit to doing something, we need to follow through on our promises. When we have difficulty giving of ourselves, we are falling back into selfishness. Initially, giving might seem daunting, but with practice it will become more spontaneous and consequently more liberating. Teaching is another form of giving. By teaching others, We are helping them to learn how to rely more on themselves. We give material resources to try to solve immediate needs. But if we want to solve needs that are more far-reaching, we teach. It is not necessary to have exceptional skills. We can simply teach whatever we are good at. But when we teach, we should not hold anything back. Consider the situation where our supervisor tells us to teach a new employee our job. How many of us will hesitate? We might think, if I teach this person everything, he will replace me. And what if I do not get promoted? I may even lose my job. I think I will hold back some important information. This way, I will stay indispensable, and my job will be secure. Or we may be asked for our recipe to that wonderful lasagna that we alone know how to bake. Along the same selfish lines, we might think, if I teach this person how to make my lasagna, people won't rave about mine as much. I'll leave out an important ingredient. Then I'll keep my reputation as a wonderful cook. This is not giving. This is selfishness. When others wish to learn, we should teach them everything we can. Only then is it genuine teaching. In the giving of teaching, the highest form of such giving, from the Buddhist perspective, is teaching others about causality, about the truth of the existence of suffering and the way to end it, and the way to liberate oneself from the cycle of rebirth. Teaching others everyday skills will bring happiness, but it will be short-lived. Teaching others how to become self-sufficient, thereby making it possible for them to provide for themselves and their families, will enable them to have self-respect and to care for those they love, as well as those who need help. But teaching others to be permanently free from suffering will bring them genuine and lasting joy. The last kind of giving is that of fearlessness. This form of giving removes the insecurities, worries, and fears of others, whether the other is human or non-human. As humans, we are afraid of many things: losing those we love, being alone, becoming ill, dying. We worry that we will not be able to provide for our families and ourselves. We worry that we will not live up to the expectations of others and to our own self-image. When we see others who are likewise afraid or uneasy, we can help to alleviate their discomfort. The giving of courage can be the sharing of a kind word, the giving of our strength and stability, or our understanding. Even a simple smile is a form of the giving of fearlessness, since it can lessen another's fears. When we relieve the worries and fears of others and help them to feel more secure, they will be able to find peace and self-respect. Whatever we do, we should focus on that person. When we act with absolute sincerity, the smallest act or a few encouraging words can work wonders to alleviate the apprehension of others. We can also give non-fear by helping wounded animals, by not participating in activities which harm animals, and by reducing our consumption of meat and fish. Giving fearlessness is enabling all beings, not just humans, to feel safer around us. It is the practice of respecting all forms of life. Whether we give material possessions or our time and abilities, we are practicing the giving of wealth. As Buddhists, we believe that those who have wealth now were generous in the past, and those who give wealth now will have wealth in the future. If we teach others today, we will be wise in the future. By giving fearlessness, we will have long, healthy lives. The giving of intangibles, of fearlessness, of teaching, of our abilities and energy costs us nothing, but it has the potential to change ourselves and to help others. But if we give with some expected return in mind, then what we will receive will be limited. When we learn to give without thoughts of what we will receive, the return will be much greater because we will be giving from our true nature. One of our major challenges to becoming awakened is greed, which results in clinging to things, people, and ideas. The best way to counter greed is through giving. Ideally, we would want to start with what is most difficult to give. But since this is very hard for most of us, we can start more modestly. What is important is how we give. If we feel that we have made a sacrifice, then we have not truly given. Neither have we given if we constantly think of what we gave, or even wish that we still had it. We may have given in the physical sense, but mentally and emotionally, we are still clinging to the object. This is not true giving. If, on the other hand, we spontaneously give something to someone just because it seems so right for her and will make her happy, and then we do not think of the object again, we will be practicing true giving. Initially, in our practice of giving, we will be happy that we have helped others. In time, we will naturally give without any thoughts of having given, of someone having received, or of what was given. At that point, we will feel the joy of acting from our true nature, the nature of perfect selflessness. The second paramita is moral discipline, which counters worry and unhappiness, and enables us to continue on our way to awakening. In a more literal sense, it means abiding by the precepts, which for Buddhists can refer to the 5 precepts, the Bodhisattva precepts, or the monastic precepts. In a broader sense, the second perfection means ethical behavior, such as following the customs and laws of wherever we are. Initially, as we begin our practice of discipline, we can focus on refraining from harming others. Gradually, we will begin to develop and increase our virtue. The ultimate form of this practice is to benefit others. Properly practicing moral discipline requires us to use good judgment and wisdom to determine what is appropriate or inappropriate. By allowing ourselves to be led by our desires and acting impulsively, we can easily harm others and ourselves. Actions that benefit others now and in the future are appropriate. Actions that bring only short-term benefit, but which harm others in the future, are inappropriate. Exploiting our natural resources, such as carrying out widespread deforestation without making provision for the planting of new trees, is one such harmful action. Also inappropriate are actions that are done to solely benefit ourselves, especially those at the expense of others. To guide us in our cultivation of non-harmful behavior, we can observe the 10 good conducts. These are divided into 3 major categories: physical, verbal, and mental. Physically, we are prohibited from killing, stealing, and engaging in sexual misconduct. These have been discussed in the previous chapter on the 5 precepts. Verbally, we are prohibited from lying, using harsh speech, divisive speech, or enticing words. Mentally, we are prohibited from giving rise to thoughts of greed, anger, and ignorance. Lying is deceptive and dishonest. We need to speak only truthful and thoughtful words. The Buddha said, "If you know anything that is hurtful and untrue, do not say it. If you know anything that is helpful but untrue, do not say it. If you know anything that is hurtful but true, do not say it. If you know anything that is both helpful and true, find the right time." We lie because we are attached to our ideas, possessions, and other people. We modify the truth to protect our self-image. We embroider the truth and make things sound better or worse than they are because we want to be praised by others, or perhaps because we are afraid of appearing incompetent. We do not value the truth in our speech because we are ignorant and do not yet understand the consequences of our untruthful words. If we wish to practice thoughtful and caring speech, we do not use abusive speech like shouting, nor do we use bad language. To speak harshly to others can destroy their peace of mind and that of all those around us. We also should not waste our time gossiping about others or discussing trivial matters. It would be much wiser to use that time engaging in activities that increase our peace of mind, like going for a walk, watching the clouds float by, sitting quietly in meditation, or chanting a Buddha's name. We also need to refrain from divisive speech. This is when, for example, while we are speaking with one person, we tell him that someone else said something untrue about him. Then, while talking to the other person, we say the first one criticized her. We have spoken divisively, and without realizing it, sown the seeds for conflict. Instead of using words to deceive others, we can ask ourselves if what we are about to say is correct, honest, and beneficial. To accomplish this, We need to be aware of what we are saying. If we are mindful of our speech, we will not carelessly say something incorrect, untrue, or harmful. If we are paying attention to what we are saying and to how the listener is reacting, we will be able to see if we upset or irritated the person. We will then be able to stop before we make the situation worse. Instead of creating more conflict and pain in this world, we will be able to foster harmony and promote mutual cooperation as we develop the patience to know when to speak wisely or when to simply remain silent. In all of our speech, we can stop ourselves from harming others by refraining from using self-serving, careless, or inappropriate language. Usually, we speak without first thinking about what we are about to say or how it will affect others. We should try to remember to use the standard of what is correct, honest, and beneficial to judge what we are about to say. The Buddha told us that speech karma is one of our most commonly committed offenses, and thus our speech karma creates more problems for us. While our thoughts do affect others, they are subtler, and thus the karmic consequences are lighter. And while we may think of doing something, the opportunity to physically act on the thought may never present itself. So we have natural roadblocks in the creation of physical karma. But speech karma is so easy to commit. We simply open our mouths, and all the unkind, thoughtless, angry words come tumbling out. Speaking is so easy, but also so potentially harmful. Our physical and verbal behavior, the first and second components of the 10 good conducts, can be good or bad depending on our thoughts, which is the third component. It is our thoughts, which usually arise from varying degrees of greed, anger, and ignorance, that are the precursors of our behavior. Greed, our craving for material things, pleasant experiences, and much more, comes from our preoccupation with self. What begins as self-preservation, our need to meet basic requirements of shelter, food, and clothing, quickly expands to our desiring that which we do not need and more of what we already have. We equate the accumulation of things with happiness and success, and so fall into a cycle of wanting, obtaining, and more wanting. Anger, like all negative emotions, seems to happen so natural and spontaneously. Initially, we do not even notice it. It feels so normal to us. The emotions of being angry, being irritated, being displeased. It happens so quickly that we hardly notice the rising rage. But before every action we commit, and prior to every word we speak, there is a preceding thought. In our lack of mindfulness, we do not notice the thought of what we are about to say or do. If we can catch the thought as it arises, we will be able to refrain from acting out of anger. Ideally, by having a heart of loving kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity, we will stop anger from arising. why is it so important to eliminate our anger? Might not the expression of our anger get it out of our system, so to speak? No, because voicing or acting on our anger does not eradicate it. On the contrary, it leads to even more anger. Our anger with a particular person goes back a long, long time. As Buddhists, we believe it goes back over uncountable lifetimes. Most of the time when we are speaking with another, we fail to be mindful of what we are saying. We may carelessly say something and hurt another's feelings without realizing it. In so doing, we have just contributed to planting another seed of anger in the consciousness of the other person. The recipient of the angry outburst may not think anything of it, at least not until we meet again, and that seed matures. The next time, the other person will say something to us with just a slight trace of animosity. Again, this incident is registered in both our consciousnesses. This enmity is passed back and forth each time our paths cross, and each time it increases and grows more serious. At some point, it will turn into hatred. Eventually, that hatred will explode and one of us will lash out at the other physically. This is why voicing our anger to eliminate it does not work. It only allows the anger to grow. Anger is not to be acted upon, but faced, acknowledged, understood, and then released. When our anger and our self-centeredness are gradually reduced, we will get along better with others, and we will begin to find our hearts of loving kindness, compassion, and joy. If you want to see the proof of this, look carefully into the face of someone who is always angry. Then gaze upon a person who is serene. Decide which one you would like to look like, which one you would like to be. As we improve in our practice of discipline, we will gradually lessen what the Buddha called the three poisons of greed, anger, and ignorance, which we all have to some degree. If left unchecked, this greed and anger of ours will grow and spread, eventually consuming us. Not understanding what is happening, we allow this to happen because we are ignorant. This ignorance is not the lack of intelligence or a derogatory comment about someone's abilities. Ignorance is a lack of understanding of the underlying truths of what is happening to us and around us. It is not knowing, or perhaps not believing in causality or in the impermanent nature of everything that is conditioned. It is believing that we exist independently of everything around us, rather than realizing that everything is interdependent. It is thinking that happiness comes from outside of us, that it lies in other people, possessions, or ideas. It is the belief that it is okay to differentiate between those we like and dislike, that it is correct to look out for ourselves at the expense of others, and that it is reasonable to judge others based on personal opinion and not on facts. When we think and act from ignorance, it becomes inevitable that we will make mistakes and not know how to fix our problems. As we begin to replace our ignorance with understanding, we will find that our greed and anger slowly dissolve. This is how we can get along better with others, become less self-absorbed, and develop the mind of joy. The third paramita is patience, which counters anger and hatred and helps us to avoid arguments and to achieve our goals. We need patience in almost everything we do. In school, we need patience to persevere in our studies. At work, patience helps us to properly accomplish our tasks. At home, patience is the foundation for interacting well with family members. Patience enables us to get along more harmoniously with those around us. It allows us to recognize our bad habits and to improve ourselves by changing those habits. Practicing patience gives us the courage and inner strength to act wisely in the face of adversity. It allows us to remain unruffled, to understand why things happen, and to stop blaming others for our problems. It is the ability to stay with a difficult and challenging undertaking without complaining, being disappointed, feeling resentful, or giving up prematurely. What is the biggest challenge to patience? Anger. When difficulties arise, we are usually surprised, and without thinking of what we are about to do, we often act out of anger. This goes against the essence of the Buddha's teachings, which is not only to avoid doing harm, but to help as well. In anger, we lash out at others, harming everyone, everything around us, as well as ourselves. Nothing is resolved. No one is helped. Instead, we create more causes for anger in our lifetime, add to the suffering of others, and lose the opportunity to help another being. The harmful effects of impatience, intolerance, and anger can be understood even if you are not able to fully consider the suffering of others before your own. When the fire of anger burns within, our face literally becomes red, our features become contorted, and our enraged demeanor upsets others. We cannot sleep, find relief, or calm down. Friends and acquaintances avoid us. Even those who love us leave. We are alone, all because we gave in to anger. We have a choice here. We really do. We do not have to allow this to happen. Whether we are an awakened being or, more likely, simply an ordinary person who dreads the feeling of losing her temper again, we can make a commitment to ourselves, a commitment to the practice of patience. Obviously, this is extremely difficult to do at first. We will have to keep reminding ourselves how anger feels and what it looks like, and then contrast it with how serenity feels and appears to others. First, we objectively consider a recent time we were angry and then remember how we felt at that time. Next, we remember the feelings of contentment and serenity that we experienced when we were enjoying time with our family or good friends, or perhaps a time when we were taking a walk on a sun-drenched day in the fall, or listening to some soothing music. Finally, we choose to commit to the cultivation of patience. This is done consciously and ideally continuously. All too often, our anger is automatic. Something happens, and in our mindless reaction, we are instantly angry. The only way to counter this is to remain in a continuous state of patience. Also, we can tell ourselves that everything is impermanent. This not only applies to enjoyable situations, but to those that are difficult as well. Painful, trying times will at some point end. This will happen much more quickly if we do not keep fueling the fire with our anger. Instead of becoming angry in all those infuriating situations, what can we do? We can remind ourselves that our reactions do not need to be blindly automatic. We can choose how to respond. If it is already too late and we have lost our temper, we can remind ourselves that we can still alter the situation. Explaining away our erratic emotions by telling ourselves that we are right and are therefore justified in getting upset accomplishes nothing. Instead, calm down and talk to the other person. This way, we will have a chance to resolve the problem. To be happy, we just need to let go of our unhappiness. What do we do when we are faced with a situation where calm logic and not retaliating with more anger just seem to make the situation even worse? One way is to withdraw and try to find a better time to talk with the person. Even when we manage to reach a more advanced state in our cultivation of patience, where we can remain calm in the face of someone's frustration and anger, we are not helping the other person if we remain there fueling their pain, and thus their suffering. There is enough unhappiness in the world already. Withdraw and try to determine what we have done to contribute to the situation. Next, sincerely determine how not to repeat the mistake. Then, find the right opportunity to talk calmly with the other person. To act out of anger is to act violently. But we have been discussing how to find happiness. When does violence make a reasonable person happy? Never. Reasonable people only wish for happiness and goodness. Through giving and ethical behavior, we can create much joy. But it takes the cultivation of patience to safeguard this goodness and protect it from the fires of anger and violence. Practicing ethical behavior may result in our beginning to feel restricted by rules and requirements. If we approach our practice from an incorrect perspective, it might well seem rigid and forbidding. So to help us avoid this problem, the Buddha wisely taught diligence, the fourth of the 6 paramitas. Diligence, or enthusiastic effort, is the joy that we bring to our practice and to all that is worthwhile in our lives. It is the true delight that arises from deep within us when we are doing what is wholesome. It enables us to keep going when we feel tired or overwhelmed. It is refreshing and inspiring. Cultivating enthusiastic effort counters laziness and brings joy to our lives, as we feel a sense of accomplishment, of finishing what we start. Laziness is often revealed as procrastination. We become involved in trivial activities and eventually end up in low spirits when the results disappoint. We know we have to do something, but somehow we keep postponing it, or we allow ourselves to be distracted. For example, it suddenly becomes vitally important to move the flowers on the dining room table to a slightly different position. After accomplishing this critical task, we sit down to what we are supposed to do. In a few moments, we remember that the bookshelf urgently needs rearranging. Another crucial accomplishment. We again sit down, but then decide that we should call a friend and tell him all about the new employee at work. After several more such essential activities, the time that we had allocated to do our original task is gone. When we think of what we needed to do and what was actually done, our mood sinks. We do not feel any real sense of satisfaction from completing those ad hoc tasks that we had deemed to be crucial. For what we actually wanted to do remains unfinished. As we think about it, the original task still looms before us, and now seems insurmountable. We become upset with ourselves for procrastinating, and feel despondent because the task still needs to be done. Lacking energy, we feel defeated and disappointed. At this point, we might turn on the television and begin flipping from one channel to another or engage in some other pointless activity. These are all forms of laziness. So how do we counter laziness? Through a commitment to what we feel is important and enough enthusiastic effort to see it through to completion. Picture again the scenario on task avoidance. You are lying on the sofa and flipping channels. The telephone rings and it is your supervisor. He asks if you could go to dinner in 30 minutes to discuss a promotion to become head of your department and a doubling of your salary. Would you still feel lazy? More than likely, you would be overflowing with enthusiasm and elation as you rush to dress for dinner. What we tell ourselves about any given situation will determine our reaction to it. If we persuade ourselves that we have plenty of time to do something, that it is not that important, and that it can wait until tomorrow or next week, then we are foolishly wasting time. The Buddha once asked a student how much time a person has left. The student answered, "A few more days." The Buddha prompted him to think again. The student pondered the question further and then replied, "A few hours." "Think again," encouraged the Buddha. "A breath?" Excellent. All we can count on is this moment. We cannot afford to waste time. This realization is not meant to be depressing, but encouraging. When we waste time, we usually feel uncomfortable as we compare our plans to the reality of what was accomplished. Perhaps we had told someone what we wanted to do, and they were depending on us to do so. Our laziness and procrastination may result in a friend being disappointed, a child or spouse being made to wait while we try to do something at the last moment, or a coworker having to work harder to make up for our missing a deadline. Previously, the question was posed of how we can attain happiness, find love, and receive others' respect. We cannot attain them through laziness. Neither can we attain liberation from all that is unsatisfactory by being lazy. We need enthusiastic effort, perseverance, and dedication in our practice and in everything that we do. To develop enthusiastic effort, we must overcome laziness with right thoughts and understanding that will engender proper attitudes and a correct frame of mind. With our personal relationships, try to remember how we were feeling when we disappointed our spouse or children. Or think of how supremely important they are to us and how important we are to them. With our work, we can focus on the seriousness of not being a dependable employee or employer. With our practice, we can come to the realization of the value of the opportunity to practice and understand the consequences of wasting yet another lifetime. These and similar techniques will gradually help us to discover how to counter our negative habits. Having reduced or even overcome laziness, we may find that we still indulge ourselves in trivial activities. We still enjoy flipping between television channels, having long conversation with friends or coworkers about other friends and coworkers, and countless other nondescript activities. Such trivial activities by themselves are not intrinsically wrong. They harm us because they distract us from accomplishing goals that we have set for ourselves. To be more caring of those we love, to cultivate loving kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity, to help others, to be more patient, and so much more. Enthusiastic effort brings joy to our lives as we feel a sense of fulfillment in finishing what we started. Trivial activities can feel like worthwhile activities if we are not careful. They will distract us from finishing what we started and rob us of the joy that comes from such accomplishments. How do we determine whether an activity is worthwhile or trivial? We can ask ourselves, what is the intention or the motivation for what we are doing? If the motivation is to help others and to enable them to find true happiness, then our time spent enthusiastically in perfecting our skills that will bring them joy is commendable. But if our intention is solely to benefit ourselves, then in spite of our hard work, we are not truly practicing enthusiastic effort, no matter how eager and enthusiastic we are. To bring happiness to others, we need to understand the causes of suffering and unhappiness. We ourselves need to be disciplined and patient. Once our hearts and minds know gentleness and peace, our verbal and physical behavior will change. Gradually, the peacefulness that is increasing within us will be reflected in what we do. The Buddha explained that every living being has the same true nature, the same ability to awaken and become enlightened. The Buddha was once like us, an ordinary person who underwent the sufferings of birth, old age, sickness, and death. But he learned how to liberate oneself from suffering. How did he do this? He sincerely developed the aspiration to leave suffering behind and to lay aside unwholesome thoughts. He was determined to live a life of not harming others, a life of helping others, a life of discipline, understanding, and patience. After he had attained supreme enlightenment, he explained that it took him innumerable lifetimes to reach the point where he was one night away from enlightenment. He arrived at that point through many practices of perfection. One of them was the practice of enthusiastic effort. How did he progress? One step at a time. And just as he did, we can do so as well.